Hello, this is Ruslan Belov again. You know, yesterday Lavrov gave a speech and said that leaving millions of Russian-speaking people in Ukraine under the Zelensky regime, as he put it, would be an unforgivable mistake. That's why this won't happen, and that's why Russia will definitely liberate these people. What do you think about that? In addition, he made a statement that it's dangerous to have any illusions about the United States. Even though they are currently saying some pleasant things toward Russia, one shouldn't be deceived because they can radically change their position literally with a snap of their fingers. Meanwhile, the battles at the front continue, and we continue to study the situation on the ground. Let's move to the map. So, friends, as you know, although there's still a week left in May, it has already become the most successful month for advances in 2025. Now let me give you the figures for the Russian forces' progress this month. The data is current as of May 21st, inclusive. In these 21 days, up to 425 square kilometers have come under our control. And mind you, this is taking into account the 3 days of ceasefire, during which, of course, the front didn't move at all. So in fact, not over 21 days, but over just 18 days, 425 square kilometers were brought under control. Overall, the summer offensive is shaping up quite successfully. It's already clear that by the end of May, the Russian army will surpass the 500 square kilometer mark. Now let's move on to the maps. We've had several very important events at the front, and one of the most significant developments yesterday was the breakthrough of Russian forces essentially into the areas near Kupyansk in the Kharkiv region. We will definitely break this down, but not just yet. We'll cover it closer to the end because we're moving from south to north, and the Kharkiv region is up north, so we'll get to it a bit later. So make sure to stay tuned and watch the entire report to the end. But let's start in the south. There has been noticeable progress in the areas of the villages of Novopol and Zelenoye Pole. In Novopol, we control the northern part of the village, and in Zelenoye Pole, more than half of the village is now under our control. And to understand how important these villages are, let's switch to the elevation map, and I'll show you. Here, you see Novopol and Zelenoye Pole. These villages are located on key high ground. Next, only Temirovka remains to be taken, and then all the heights in this section will be under full control of the Russian army. By the way, Temirovka is no longer in Donetsk, but in Zaporizhia region. And overall, you know, this week the Ukrainian armed forces have suffered a significant setback here. At least as of Monday, Russian positions were still over here, and now they're already fighting inside the village. So what's the outlook here? Most likely the advance will continue down the highway toward Gulyaipol. And if you again look at the elevation map, it's clear that geographically this is a very convenient direction, because from the high ground the Russian army can control all these areas. From Zelenoye Pole, the forces will be descending toward Gulyaipol, and there's a straight road that leads directly to the northern outskirts of Gulyaipol. As for the Komarovskoye direction, there's also been solid progress toward the town. Russian forces have moved close to the settlement from the east, coming from Otradnoye, and from the southeast, taking control of several additional fields. From the south, at the moment, the situation in Fyodorovka is stuck. So far, there has been no breakthrough to take the village and reach the outskirts of Komar from the south. The fighting is very intense, and just the other day, a whole Ukrainian unit got trapped here. They were all killed. But while we are bogged down in Fyodorovka, there is clear progress in Otradnoye. Even according to Ukrainian military analysts, Russian troops not only entered Otradnoye, but now control most of the village. And based on our own information, confirmed by objective control footage, the entire village is under Russian control. We showed you Russian flags in various parts of the village already yesterday. Let me now explain in more detail what's happening here and what kind of disaster is unfolding for the Ukrainian armed forces. And it is indeed a disaster. I've seen different reports from the Ukrainian side, various assessments. Some say we control a third of the village, some say the majority. From our side, up until last night, there was radio silence. The soldier I was in contact with wasn't responding. But then video footage appeared, objective control videos from Otradnoye showing flags in different parts of the village, on the southern edge, in the center, on the western and northern edges. Meanwhile, if we look at Ukrainian maps, they're in complete denial. But the data from the objective video control leaves no doubt. Otradnoy is fully under Russian control. So now the question is, what's next? What are the prospects here? As I already mentioned, a local disaster is looming for the Ukrainian forces. Look, they've lost Bogatyr, a major fortified area. Now they've lost Otradnoye, another fortified position, 2 strongholds lost in a short time. But the big disaster is still ahead, because now, after Otradnoye, there are 7 to 8 kilometers of open terrain with no fortifications. As a result, they'll be forced to retreat westward to Komar and northwest towards Zaporizhia and Yalta. These aren't big cities, they're small villages, here in Donetsk Oblast. As you can see, this entire area, about 50 square kilometers, is essentially empty and lacks strong fortifications. Again, no significant fortifications, and it will very quickly fall under Russian control. As early as next week, you'll be seeing significant territorial changes here. That's why I told you that everything will soon change on the Komarovsky axis, because after the capture of Otradny, we'll be moving further west, and eventually we'll also reach Komar. Right now, the distance is not that large. At the moment, only 5 kilometers separate the Russian army from Komar, and from the south, the distance is even shorter. So very soon, we'll see the beginning of battles for that settlement. Now I want to show you how far the Russian forces have advanced westward from the town of Kurakov. It feels like the fighting there ended only recently, and yet the distance from Kurakov to the current Russian positions is now over 30 kilometers. And soon it will be around 40 kilometers. On the surface, the front doesn't appear to be shifting dramatically, but Russia's current advances are being achieved with much less effort than before. And over time, the Ukrainian armed forces are gradually losing more and more of their advantage. What can I say? The Vostok, the East group here, is demonstrating brilliant and highly effective work, making steady progress at a good pace. Let's move on. For now, there are no updates from the area in front of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Fighting is ongoing in Orikhiv. We're also trying to secure positions near the border with Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The first attempt wasn't particularly successful, but the second one went better. We've reached the border and firmly entrenched ourselves in the forest belts already inside Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Also, there is very intense fighting in Novomykolaivka, but I can't yet say how much of the village we control. The only confirmed detail is that we've taken full control of the southernmost street. We're also continuing to push through the defenses and move toward the village center. In addition, we are still attempting to reach the village of Moravka, but for now there are no major updates here. In general, there's not much news from the front lines in front of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Rather, there's practically none. That doesn't mean there's no progress. There is progress here, but a silence mode has been activated, and information is very scarce. Still, I think we'll soon start to see some map updates showing territorial changes. But where there is plenty of information, and where things are particularly bad for the Ukrainian forces, is on the eastern flank of Mirnohrad, and in the pocket between Mirnohrad and Toretsk. Our forces are advancing here every single day, literally every day, and so we talk about this section every day too. So what's the situation here at the moment? On the eastern flank of Mirnohrad, we've reached the outskirts of 3 settlements, Shevchenko-Persha, Popov Yar and Poltavka. Yesterday, we were about a kilometer away from both Popov Yar and Poltavka, but already this morning I saw a report from the Ukrainian side, notably, that Russian forces had entered Popov Yar and Poltavka and that fighting has begun in those villages. Of course, we still need additional confirmations, and I'll be posting all the updates as they come in on my Telegram channel. So if you want to stay informed, follow the link in the first comment and subscribe. But if these reports are confirmed, then the situation for the AFU is even worse than I thought. Let me repeat, the loss of Popov Yar and Poltavka would essentially collapse the entire western defense of Kostyantynivka. That would leave only 2 villages to take, Ruslan Yar and Dolha Balka. And then, you see for yourself, both villages are surrounded by completely open terrain. In other words, Popov Yar and Poltavka are the last real defensive line. And if that line is breached, which it now appears will happen, then the advance will proceed at an even faster pace. and the battle for Kostyantynivka is rapidly approaching. As for Shevchenko-Pershi, yesterday a pig farm on the southern edge of the village came under Russian control, and today or tomorrow we may get information about Russian forces entering and launching assault operations. Now, concerning the pocket between Mirnohrad and Toretsk, the battles for two villages, Stara Mykolivka and Ikhnativka, are nearing completion. But I won't focus too much on that right now, because perhaps the most significant news from yesterday was the announcement from the Russian Ministry of Defense that the village of Radkivka in Kharkiv Oblast, in the Kupyansk district, has come under Russian control. Look where it's located, right on the outskirts of Kupyansk. If you measure the distance between Radkivka and Kupyansk, it's just about 1 kilometer. 1 kilometer. And the northern edge of the right bank part of Kupyansk is now saying hello to the Russian army. What's important is that this is the right bank part of the city, which is elevated relative to the left bank. If you take the right bank, the left bank practically falls into your hands automatically. That's why, if you remember, in the fall of last year, there was an ill-fated attempt by our forces to enter the left bank part of Kupyansk. We reached almost the center, even took part of the industrial zone, but we couldn't hold it, simply because the heights were on the right bank. And from there, artillery and everything else just rained down on our forces. So, after taking losses and realizing it was impossible to hold, we had to retreat. This time, the same logic applies. If our forces take the right bank part, the left will fall without much of a fight. AFU will likely retreat on their own. But the logical question is, how did we even manage to take Radkivka? Well, before that, without any announcements or fanfare, our troops took Kondrashivka. Not 100% control yet, but enough to reach Radkivka. The AFU are still hiding in basements there, but that no longer matters. Still, it's important to understand, despite the success, despite capturing Radkivka, and despite the fact that Kupyansk is now only 1 kilometer away, that doesn't mean an assault on Kupyansk will begin tomorrow or the next day. Of course not. First, the zone of control must be expanded westward and southwestward by at least 5 kilometers to ensure flank security. Only after that can we begin considering entering the city. And today we've also seen a map update showing that part of Kondrashivka is under Russian control. As I said in my video on the goals of the spring-summer campaign, Kupyansk is definitely part of that plan. The battle for Kupyansk remains on the agenda, and the recent operations in Kondrashivka and Radkivka confirm this. We'll be watching and waiting. Now I want to mention the latest important development. Right before recording this video, we received confirmation from the Russian Ministry of Defense that the suburb of Chasiv Yar, specifically the settlement of Stupochki, has come under full Russian control. This is actually a very significant development because both this settlement and Chasiv Yar itself are situated on elevated terrain. Let me show you this clearly on a topographic map. It's no coincidence that the Ukrainian side keeps throwing reserves into this area. They understand perfectly well that without control over Chasiv Yar and the surrounding region, the fate of the major city of Kostyantynivka may soon be sealed. Nearby are several other large cities, Druzhkivka, Sloviansk, and Kramatorsk. As a reminder, the population of this agglomeration before the war was around 450,000 to 500,000 people. In addition, this region has a large number of industrial plants. Previously, this region, like all of Donetsk Oblast, was a highly developed part of Ukraine. During Ukraine's independence, oligarchs and the authorities didn't invest much here, and the region fell into some decline. But it still has great potential, which is exactly why Russia is trying to take it. The goal here isn't just political, but also economic. The USSR once poured a huge amount of resources into this region. It's rich in natural resources. Well, that's all I have for today on the frontline situation. That's all for now. Thank you for watching and staying up to date with the latest developments. Make sure to subscribe and follow the Telegram channel for real-time updates. Take care and see you in the next report.